Thanks for joining us on another BILSTEIN podcast with Shane, Mike, and Junior. Also Chelsea and Garrett in the back scenes.
The support team.
The support team, the ones who make it happen. Today we're going to touch on a few things that set us aside from our competition. That a lot of BILSTEIN customers think that BILSTEIN just makes truck shocks. Well, not the case. We are definitely heavy into motorsports and passenger car, performance passenger car. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today, get you guys educated on what should be done and maybe what shouldn't be done to your cars.
Don't forget luxury cars.
Luxury cars.
Well. We do have Rolls-Royce fitments.
Well, not only that, we also have all those really high-tech, fancy air springs.
Yes, we did.
Mercedes-Benz.
Mercedes-Benz, yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the fact that we are BILSTEIN and we can actually make a strut.
And guess
exactly.
what?
Standard or inverted, and we make air springs that actually have the proper electronics to function with your OE components.
I was going to bring that up because at the truck shows, people go, "Do you have anything electronic?"
Yes, we do.
And I say, "Sure, we make the most advanced electronic dampers in the world. Some of them, some of the most advanced."
And we can't say the names, but we do make some of the most advanced electronic dampers for some of these OE cars. We're not allowed to say who it is.
We're not.
No.
Why not?
What are you talking about? Well, let's just say
we make.
I was told by that guy at Twitter that we weren't allowed to say.
Okay, well, forget about that company, but let's talk about Mercedes-Benz.
Okay.
Who else do we make air shocks for? Land Rover?
Land Rover, BMW.
Air shocks are also always electronic for the most part.
Let's back up a second, though. We don't want to start at the high end of the product. We should probably start in at the entry-level product. So we might just take a quick walk through the product a little bit and then go back onto the high-end stuff, because I know we all like to talk about the technically cool stuff. But just so you folks know, we're all, those of us sitting at this table are all tech, and we want to talk about the coolest stuff we have. But we do make everything for every type of vehicle out there, pretty much starting with an entry-level line, which we call our OEM replacement line. So if you're looking for shocks for your commuter, that car that you put 100,000 miles a year on, we also make a product for that. We don't want to leave those folks out. We know that some people have a trick car that they're working on trying to fix up, and then they have that commuter. So,
but keep in mind too, as well, we are still a enthusiast damper manufacturer.
Yep.
So, with that said, I know we'll get a lot of comments that you don't make anything for my Acura CL or my Acura TL. Yes, we do not do a whole bunch of Asian market vehicles. We do, because we are a German manufacturer, we do tons of German car stuff.
European, yeah. Mm-hmm.
European car, but if it's an enthusiast Japanese car, like a Mazda Miata or a FRS, we do cover the enthusiast side of the Asian market.
WRX,
absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Evolution.
So if you're buying a vehicle for a reason outside of point A to point B, we probably got a damper for you, because we are more of the enthusiast market than we are just a replacement damper manufacturer, although we do cover the replacement damper.
Yeah, we have a whole segment dedicated to OE replacement parts, and we literally call it that in our catalog.
And once again, just like our truck line, we were talking about how we are the only shock manufacturer that tunes for long arm versus short arm. Remember that conversation?
Right.
Yep.
On even our B4 line, we are also the only manufacturer that builds a damper specific to how the chassis was built from the manufacturer. So if you have a E90 with a sport package, it's going to take a specific damper because the springs are typically 10 to 15% heavier, so it's going to need some more damping, right? Well, if you look into most manufacturers, they have one shock for an E90 sedan.
One part number, yep.
Whereas we have a standard suspension and a sport suspension. And to get this off the ground, just to let people know, it's not what you want to run, it's what you need to run. So if you're not certain if your E90 sedan has sport suspension, it's just as simple as a phone call with your VIN number to BMW and saying, hey, what suspension do I have? make sure you're buying the correct damper for your correct suspension. So if you have a standard BMWs are very easy to point out because typically a sports suspension car has the adjustable seats and shadow line trim. It's all black around the door edges, whereas a standard suspension has the chrome around the door edges and it has no sports seats. So, but outside of that, they do some tricky stuff. So just call and get the appropriate shock absorber for the way your car was built.
Is that the night edition?
The night edition, yeah.
Does that have the night edition?
I think Toyota had the night edition.
But to piggyback off that point that Junior was just making, so the fact that we make a sport and non-sport aftermarket replacement part, it ties in with the fact that we are actually OE on most of these vehicles as well, which that also brings up a great point too. So our manufacturing capability is designed to supply at an OE level, quality and volume. So as a manufacturer, we have to build to that tier 1 setting that the OEs are buying. So it does bring quality across the entire line, OE and aftermarket.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, we often get the question, hey, so I do have an E90 sedan and I want my car, I'm retiring this thing as a daily driver and I'm going to start tracking it. This is when you start discussing, hey, maybe an inverted monotube would be right for you. Because though it might not be the correct choice for someone that daily drives their vehicle and wants a little more compliance in the ride, now they can get the high pressure monotube, the inverted monotube damper to get a little more spirited handling, even with the stock spring, or they can get into our B12, B14, B16 Club Sport.
Right up the ladder. Yeah. And did you want to explain?
So before you segue in that, so we talked about the OE replacement, and that has it's called a B4.
Right.
So now we're moving into the B6.
B6. And
why would you want to go from a B4 to a B6?
That's what I was going to ask him. Yeah, I was going to ask him about the inverted monotube design. So did you want to explain that really quick, why that is so cool and so important?
Well, an inverted strut typically is it's downward facing, right? So you have a stand tube, the piston rod bolts to the bottom of your stand tube, and it's just exactly what it says. It operates as an inverted fashion.
It's like a dirt bike.
Yeah, like a motorcycle fork.
Monotube.
And what does it do? It just gives us more lateral loading surface on that
a lot more
shock tube. So you have a 30 millimeter shock tube versus a 14 millimeter piston rod, right?
Yeah.
So you create a lot more strength in the lateral loading, which makes a very, very strong strut.
And you can run a larger piston.
You can run a larger piston
with it inverted.
So beside the fact that it's inverted monotube, now we'll get into the characteristics of the way it rides. So how would that ride compared to a B4?
Oh, it's just far more spirited. It's high pressure gas force versus low pressure twin tube. But like I've said in the past, even on the truck stuff, I mean, we get a lot of questions on what's the best shock I could put on my car. It's not, we don't make a best, better, and best. All of our dampers are purpose built.
Right.
So what do you want as a consumer? How do you want your vehicle to handle it? If you want it to handle just like it did from the factory, you're a B4 customer.
Right.
If you want to feel a little more spirited around turns and you have stock springs and it's a standard suspension, you want probably a B6, right? And then it goes on and on, you know. So if you're a lowered ride height, then you want to go into a B8 that has most 90% of them have a different extended dimension, so it keeps your coil captured, when the corner's unweighted. So, however, there's a lot of BMWs and a lot of Mercedes, like the AMG cars, the M cars, that actually require, that we recommend a B8 for and only build a B8 for as a replacement component.
Well, I think that's a good point. Before you get too far off of the B8, is the spring coming unseated, right?
So
when you do a lowered coil, typically they're not as long as the the factory
free
spring.
length. Right.
So a lot of times you need to have the B8s are going to be shorter
to capture the shorter spring.
So the spring doesn't come out.
Right. Yep. So I mean, this is typically where you would see a guy that's taking his car to the tire shop, right? And they're going to change the tires, so they jack up every corner of the car. They pull the tires off, and the suspension's hanging, right? And if the shock is too long or stock length on a lowering spring, the springs fall off the seats, off the buckets, and out of the car.
Yeah, and the right way to do it is kind of guide it back into the spring pocket. But a lot of people don't even do that.
Exactly, if you're paying attention. So the B8 design came up to prevent that problem.
Right, and I think we're the only manufacturer yet again that builds a damper that's shortened for that purpose.
Yeah, safety to keep that spring captured. Now, cars don't jump off the road and unweight, but
well, the bigger thing is also like you got to understand all the high quality springs that guys are choosing to lower these things. H&R, Eibach, Voglin, all these guys state that these springs are intended to use with OE dampers. They were tested with OE dampers.
True.
Which brings me to another point that we don't build B8 dampers for every application, especially American muscle.
Right.
Like your Dodge Charger, your Challenger, your Camaro, your Mustang. I mean, I think we do B8s for Mustang on the strut side, but but if we don't feel the need to make the change, we're not going to make it.
Right. Why create another useless part number? Right.
Correct. So you know, we get a lot of the guys that say, "Hey, I put some springs on my truck or on my Challenger, and now I'm looking for a B8. Everyone says I need a B8. No, you need a B6."
And that would be the catalog would help the customer find that, right?
I think in the old day, like in the 80s, 70s, it was usually the lifted or the lowered springs. You definitely needed a shorter strut.
Right.
Mm-hmm. In recent times, like Junior said, they started making the springs, probably better spring technology,
just more universal,
progressive rate.
Right.
It's captured with a factory shock.
Yeah.
So, I think it's more of a factor in recent times.
Right, and it's also like the style of suspension again. Like a strut suspension is going to be more forgiving than if you take a D21 Nissan hardbody and you slam it. You're going to need a shorter shock.
Right.
So it's different suspension styles again, different motion ratios again, different. The way it's sprung is different. So all that makes a huge.
So any B8s for like the E30s or the Golf 3s, Golf 2s,
right.
Like you'll see an actual shorter shock, different valving.
Yep.
Because back in those days, the springs were way different.
The spring is going to be firmer if it's shorter, obviously.
Well, it's closer to the bump stop, so you want a little more compression damping, rebound damping. You want to typically anytime you lower a vehicle, you're getting it closer to the bump stop. So you want on a non-inverted, which all of our inverted shocks guys have a bump stop internally.
Let's get into that. Yeah. We always get that question.
Yeah. So if it's
you don't drill a hole in that factory bump stop and try to shove it over a 36
or you don't try to horseshoe your factory BMW boot over an inverted strut.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's just
we provide all that stuff for you.
Yeah. So all of our inverted dampers have anywhere between a 45 millimeter to a 60 millimeter bump stop internal of the stand tube that rides on the actual piston rod.
Yep. And that's a great place for it because it's protected from the elements there. It's not going to break down. It's not going to fall off. It's basically inside the stand tube protected, and it's bolted on the piston rod so you never lose it.
So if you have an inverted shock and you were thinking of emailing us or giving us a call about the bump stop, it is inside your shock.
Exactly.
Bravo.
Yep.
Okay.
So we've talked about lowering with the B8. So now,
well, you don't lower with the B8. You
lower with the spring. Right. So the B8 is designed for a customer who wants to buy that damper and find their own lowering spring and lower their car. Now we actually put that in a kit form. What do we call that? A B12?
B12.
So that is
B12 kit.
It is a German spec Eibach spring, not a US spec. It's a German spec Eibach spring. And it comes with either a B8 or a B6 damper. So if we've determined that the B8 is not needed in this chassis, guess what? You're going to get a B6, and you didn't get cheated.
Right.
So
the part number would show up cataloged as a B6.
Correct. And here's the nice part about it. Here's the nice part about the B12 kit is the dampers that come with it have a limited lifetime warranty against manufacturing defect.
And they're tuned to work with the spring that's in the box. You don't have to go hunting for the right spring that's the right height and all that kind of stuff. So if there was any question, like if you're going out to lower your car and you just want to buy a B8 and search for a spring yourself, that can be overwhelming. I mean, you start looking at spring catalogs, how much do they lower my car, what's the rate, all this kind of stuff, that can be overwhelming. So with B12 kit, you get that spring already packaged in the box.
There's no guesswork.
No guesswork.
It's a one-click kit.
Yeah. I mean, we have the same product in truck.
I love that terminology. Who came up with that terminology?
I don't know. I think I might have heard that from you.
From the heavyset guy.
Yeah.
Hey, so
Hey.
let's touch on the difference between a German application versus like a U.S. application.
I also want to say it's plug and play.
It's plug and play.
And one click.
OEM plus.
Oh, Shane just brought up a
OEM
point.
minus.
OEM minus.
It's going to take us a couple hours to get there, but the plug and play point, we definitely want to touch on that later when we get to the electronic dampers.
Typically, when you have a Challenger or a Charger, which is the same damper, or a Camaro or a Mustang, the way domestic vehicles are engineered, they have quite a bit longer damper and spring than that of a German car. E30, E36, E46, E90, E91, any German car, even, well, I shouldn't say this on Mercedes because the old 80s Mercedes was a standalone shock absorber,
right?
With the standalone. I mean, actually that went through the 90s,
yeah.
right? Long assemblies. However, we don't offer B8s for those either. They're all B6s with lowering springs. So when you have that threshold of a longer assembly with a longer spring, you can get away with a B6, right?
Right.
It's when you get a real short assembly or a coilover assembly, and it's super short, that's when you want to make sure you're shortening up the assembly so the spring doesn't come unseated. So for all those that have that question about why don't I get a B8, the B8 is nothing, it's not any more special than the B6 damper. They're both equally as special as far as the way they're going to change the chassis characteristic on your vehicle. So it's not that the B6 is any better than the B8 or the B8 is any better than the B6. These are, again, going back to BILSTEIN roots as we build purpose-built dampers. Do you think we like to catalog 16 different shocks for one application? Hell no.
Do you think we like to manufacture that many special shocks?
Yeah, they're purpose-built shocks. So if you have a standard suspension, get a standard shock.
Right.
If you have a sport suspension, get a sport shock. And if you want to get into the monotube stuff, if you have standard suspension, get a B6.
Right.
And if you have a sport suspension, M Techniques, AMG, you're going to likely need a B8.
Now, what's the threshold on the B8 as far as lowering? Did we ever set a number on that? It's around an inch, isn't it? 25 millimeters?
Inch and a half?
Yeah. So, guys, if you're shopping for springs to match up with your B8s.
And by no means are we telling you to lower your vehicle an inch and a half, because it doesn't sound like much, but it gets you awful close to speed bumps and driveways.
If you go back to our truck talks, anytime you change the vehicle's geometry that much, you're looking at some potential sad face issues going forward.
And just like the Overlander, I think it's a trend, right? I think it's people do this for aesthetics. It's just like lowering a vehicle. Most guys lowering a vehicle are after the aesthetics. They want to fill up their wheel well. They want to get it just the fenders right up to the tire.
The stance has to be just
However,
right. Yeah.
there are applications where you are going to lose performance by altering your ride height. You know what I mean? Like as far as like breakover angles, your ability to drive the vehicle anymore becomes more of a nuisance, right? When you get too low. So these guys want to slam their vehicles and they want to stance them. That's the stance crowd's a whole different thing.
That's completely different.
Hey, before we get too far down the rabbit hole of the how low to go, you're about ready to explain the difference between a German spec spring, Eibach spring, and a U.S.
So we use a German spec, which is a little bit different than the U.S. spec models, because this goes back to rest of world vehicles, right? So Germany builds for rest of world. In America, we build for U.S. spec. Mm-hmm. So chances are the German spec spring's not going to introduce as much drop, because the rest of world vehicle is already typically 10 millimeters lower than factory.
True, and they have TÜV in Germany, so the laws over there don't allow them to modify a vehicle beyond a certain height and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So, and it gets back to Junior's point and what Shane was talking about there as well, is how low is too low. And I wanted to add on to your comment is that BILSTEIN will not build, engineer, and sell a product that hurts your vehicle. I mean, our whole goal is to make sure that we are enhancing the performance. So let's just say you have a Porsche GT3 and you look at one of our high performance kit and the max drop is 10 millimeters. there's a reason why we're only giving you 10 millimeters of drop on that kit, is because if you go any lower than that, there's a good chance you're going to damage something.
As BILSTEIN has determined, that's the lowest you can go without sacrificing
Well, I'm going to
performance.
go in even deeper on this.
Let's get deep.
Let's do it.
So chances are, if you got a GT3 RS or something like that, and you're putting a club sport kit on it, and you're working off of our instructions that say a 10 millimeter drop, that's from a rest of world vehicle. Because all of our German components all the instructions are done in Germany off of rest of world vehicles.
Right.
So chances are you're 10 millimeters higher than rest of world. So make sure that that's accounted for when you're altering your ride height. Know that you're about 10 millimeters higher on a US spec vehicle than you would be on a rest of world vehicle.
And simply because the quality of the roads over there is the reason why they're allowing a little bit more drop?
Much better.
Yeah.
Much better. So
Yeah.
they can get them lower from the factory and not have to worry about concrete to asphalt transitions jarring the life out of you.
I remember when we started doing, and we haven't quite got there yet in our conversation, but when we started doing the coilover kits, that we would get a kit from Germany and then have to do a little bit of redesign work here in the U.S. to actually make it work on the U.S. spec cars. Mm-hmm. Now, the communication between Germany and the United States sides of the companies has gotten much better, and now everything comes from Germany completely ready to go on the cars here in the United States. Just follow the instruction manuals according to the way they're written.
Let's also get even a little bit more deep.
Way down.
Well, I mean, and think about what goes on in Europe. They can actually drive these cars as fast as they're designed
As fast as they want to, yeah.
That little thing called the Autobahn.
Autobahn, yeah.
And I hear stories from our
colleagues
in Germany about how fast they drive.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. They drive 150 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I think that's a great point when you have like a B6, B8, B12.
It's been driven at that speed.
It's designed to drive that fast.
Yeah.
Not that we're telling anybody to do this.
Well, we're talking about our German colleagues.
Well, they need a certain level of performance
Absolutely.
to be able to do that.
And I will tell
you know what? Who cares what it looks like? It can go that fast.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, I mean, I will tell you, I've gone over there for business travel, and I rent a little like economy car, right? And I get on the Autobahn, and I'm looking in my rearview mirror, and I see a set of lights, like 5 miles back, right? And I'm like, they're never gonna catch me. The car passes you in like 1 second, doing 100 miles an hour, and you're like, what just went by? Was that an airplane or something that just went past?
And he was
me?
in the slow lane.
Yeah, and so it is really amazing to go over there and drive on those roads and see the vehicles perform like that.
So to explain it, so when you're an OE manufacturer, whether it's BMW, whether it's Chrysler, you have to have more compliance within the suspension to make it desirable to the consumer. Like they jump in a car, and this is why a lot of half-ton trucks in the U.S. there's P-metric tires on them. They want them nice and squishy.
Soft, yeah.
They want, soft suspension on them. So when you get in and you test drive this $70,000 Silverado, it's just plush. And then they realize a day and a half later that it's too plush. So now they want to firm it up. Same thing with the standard passenger car. You got to make, the manufacturer's goal is to make it as compliant as possible while still achieving a certain amount of performance.
Safety, yeah.
Right? Within the chassis. So it's our job as a damper manufacturer to give that enthusiast the control that they're looking for, that the manufacturer left out on purpose. Unless you're buying a GT3 RS, or unless you're buying an M4 track edition or a M5 competition, something that's more, you go in and you put your $150,000, $180,000 down, you're buying a car that's going to be pretty rigid. Right?
And the reason being is it's going to go 150 miles an hour. Right. And you can't do that on the
right, but if you
if
you want to spend only $110,000, you get the M50i, M550i, still a fast car, but it's more compliant. Now, if you want it to behave more like the M5 competition, you could put a B16 kit on there, and that'll handle the business for you.
Right. Well, I mean, that's a good place maybe to segue into beyond the B8 and lowering springs conversation.
And B12.
And B12. Well, have we got to B12 yet? Or are we getting there?
B12.
B12 was the kit in one box, the one-click kit.
That was the one kit. Before we go into B12, do we want to talk about the B8 that lifts?
Which B8 that lifts? Let's hear about this. This might be pretty new. I think I know what it is, but I'm going to let you announce it.
A B8. So before we get to B12s, which are kits that include springs, one-click
Kit.
One-click kit.
Yep.
Plug and play. So
OEM negative.
we actually we actually have a plug and play one-click. Actually, it's not a kit. They're sold individually, but a B8. It's called a B8 TerraSport.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going to call it a Trail Sport, but Honda beat us to the punch right as we were coming out, so we changed it to TerraSport. And a B8 TerraSport are four-corner struts, or it's basically a bolt-on shock absorber that will use the OEM coils, and it'll lift the car. It's designed for CUVs.
Mm-hmm.
So for lifting your CUV 1.5 inches, typically, to get more ground clearance, and you can put on a bigger tire, and it'll be a lot safer for if you're driving on forestry roads and things like that.
Right. Same question that we would ask, right? What are you going to do with your vehicle? So you have this little passenger car that's pretty off-road capable.
And then again, this is something
passenger CUV.
Something BILSTEIN did to combat the cheap spacer market.
Yes.
Not that spacers don't have their place in the market. However, this is our way. So we put some tech behind it. It's a little bit longer strut, a relocated strut mount. So your strut seat is welded higher on the longer assembly. So you're not introducing a ton of preload. You're getting a little bit longer assembly, and it's able to lift the car 1 inch safely.
With fairly correct geometry.
Typically 1 to 2 inch, depending on
1
what
to 2
it
inch,
is.
right. And the rear is typically monotube, and the front would be a twin tube because it's a strut.
Right.
And if the rear is a separate shock and spring, it'll come with some kind of a coil spring spacer just in the back. But if it's four-corner struts like a Subaru, it'll have the
four longer struts. Yep, with longer springs and all that.
And the setup is it'll allow like the distance between the spindle and the strut is a little bit bigger, so you can longer, so you can put a bigger tire on there.
Yeah, so no one typically puts a longer strut or a longer rear shock. They just put the spacers and let the strut and shock top out.
Right. We talked about that in other episodes with lifted trucks.
Yeah, this is your opportunity to get something that's built for the vehicle, that's not going to top out, that's not going to reach its limitation prematurely, and the ride quality is going to be better than stock in 95% of the
It's a lot better than stock.
A lot.
I was used to driving a Jeep that has 6 inches of droop. So
yeah, that thing you skied it over those.
We always want to make sure that we're talking from the truth here, and so we definitely tested that product and we know exactly how well it works.
Yeah, but why would you want to do this if you're into adventuring, you want to go hiking, you want to go camping, you've picked a CUV, it's going to be a lot safer to go on a dirt road with off-road tires for one, and a little bit more ground clearance.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I'll tell you what, these things come with the worst P-metric street tires, and you drive them down a graded dirt road for 2 seconds.
They're picking up everything.
Yeah.
And you got a flat tire.
Yeah.
And guess what happens when you have a flat tire? You're going for a walk.
Yeah, you sit on the side of the road and wait for all.
Or if you're exploring in the summertime, you're swapping a spare at 116 degrees.
Yeah.
Which isn't
so it makes it a safer. The whole package is a lot safer.
A lot more controlled. You feel like, and there's guys that want to get 27 to 30 miles a gallon out of their adventure vehicle, which I don't blame them. Gas, where we're at, it's $5 a gallon. So the CUV market is booming, I think, because of that reason.
Yeah.
Right. So if someone wants to put $50 in their tank rather than $150 and go to the same spot your 4Runner's going.
Yep.
And it's true.
It's definitely true that you see these little vehicles out doing some pretty crazy stuff.
Kim has a sport track.
Yeah. We have
Chelsea has a sport track. They went on BILSTEIN Women's Day and wheeled their sport tracks.
Took them on a pretty gnarly trail, I heard.
Was it fun?
It was so much fun.
All the feedback we had on that from the ladies has been like immensely good feedback. They were all out enjoying the summer sun and trails and all that kind of stuff.
In sport tracks.
In sport tracks. So it was amazing.
So yeah, B8. We've got B8 lowers, but now we've introduced this TerraSport that will actually lift the car.
So OEM plus versus OEM negative.
Well, we have to change the terminology. I think we discussed this earlier that we're no longer going to call B8, since it also crosses over into the truck world, we're not going to call it a lowering. We're going to call it a B8 is for a vehicle that's been modified, either lifted
ride
or
height.
Lowered. Yeah, ride height adjusted. So that's the B8 line. Do we want to try to... So... We've all been to shows or got calls on Tech Line or really pretty much anywhere we go. Everyone wants to know about coilovers. Do we want to even get into coilovers?
We do, but did we talk about B12? We talked about B12,
We did talk
right?
about B12, yeah.
Yeah.
So the next...
Probably the most efficient, cost-effective way to get better performance out of your vehicle is with a B12.
Right.
And what else?
Here's the deal. When you calculate your monies...
Monies?
When you calculate your monies, and you're optioning for when you're calculating your, that's when you have more than one money.
Oh, okay.
So when you're calculating your monies and you're saying, hey, I want to do a Voglin spring or an H&R spring or an Eibach spring, and I want to pair them with a B8. When you calculate how much 4 B8s are going to cost you,
Plus the springs.
plus your springs, you're almost getting the springs for free.
Yeah, if you buy the B12
If you
kit.
buy a B12
Yeah,
kit.
Yeah,
And
and
if
you're
you get-
getting a good quality spring, too.
Yeah, and Eibach spring.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a German spec Eibach spring. So when you're at Cars and Coffee, you could say, hey,
Wait
these
a
are
sec.
German
Yeah, these are the
Eibach springs.
These are the true
Yeah.
Eibach
And
springs.
and why else would you want a B12 over
Just
a
because
coilover?
because it's OE fitment.
OE fitment.
Yes.
OE fitment. So you have, if your coil bucket's pigtailed, you can pigtail your coil in there. So it's just OEM fitment. There's
And
no corner balancing.
It uses all the OEM spring isolators,
All the OE spring-
top mounts.
All OE quality stuff.
Yeah.
So
So
it's
you get
just a
the-
no-brainer.
So you get the lowering you want.
You get the dampers that are going to
Without
increase
the
your
sad
performance, and everything's going to go BOE. So you're not going to get any additional noises that are common of coilovers, not just Bilstein coilovers,
Right.
but you're going to get a plug and play
Yep.
OE minus.
Yeah. OE minus.
OE minus.
Well,
click.
in the BAs, in the TerraSport case, it's an OEM plus again.
Yes.
Right, because you're
actually
increasing height.
lifting the car. So we've danced around it enough now. I think it's time to answer the question: why or how or when do I need coilovers, or do I need coilovers?
That's really a question that you as the consumer need to ask yourself.
So,
But I'll tell you,
I'll play the consumer. Why do I need coilovers?
usage. What are you doing with the vehicle?
Right.
Like, and we have multiple again. It's the Bilstein
Well, let's
tradition
explain.
to make sure we target a market.
Right.
It's the Bilstein tradition to make
Let's explain
everything that we possibly can. So we make a B14,
Right.
which is ride height adjustable,
Right.
non-damping adjustable.
Right.
Okay. Then we do a B16 that's ride height and damping adjustable.
Right. Single.
Single damping adjustment. So it controls both compression and rebound
Yep.
on your adjustment.
It does a sweep.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a vehicle that's typically, tracked, or it's more leaning towards more performance than even a B16, we'll offer a club sport, but we don't offer it for everything.
Yeah, the club sport's more exactly what it says, is like for a club racer, and it is.
And it's rigid.
It's expensive. It runs on monoballs. It's,
it's definitely.
I would call it a race car part. It actually
Yeah.
falls into our motorsports cataloging, so it's.
It's definitely not for someone that just wants a lowered car that's
Right.
going to work every day. I mean, these are very heavily sprung, heavily damped. They do have a separate rebound and compression adjustment.
They're designed for track racing.
They're designed
Yeah.
for
Track
race.
days.
Yeah, so I think we should flip flop back a little bit and just explain what a coilover is in case everybody's not aware of it. Is so in the B8 damper, the spring plate or the lower place where the spring mounts onto the strut, it's welded, right?
Yes.
So it's in a fixed position on the stand tube.
On a strut, and if it's a separate coil, it's obviously goes into the
Right. It's a shorter
OEM.
spring and goes into the stock buckets. when we say coilover, we're taking that lower spring plate and we're adding some threads to the body of the damper so the customer is able to adjust the ride height, right? So you get some spanner wrenches. You've all seen the spanner wrenches. And you loosen one nut and you raise and lower the spring seat, which gives the customer the ability to modify the vehicle's ride height. So back to my question, why would you want a coilover? Are you going to want to change your ride height on a daily basis?
I wouldn't.
No, I wouldn't either.
I wouldn't, but there's guys out there that do. So the benefit of it is you do get a little better track performance. You do get a little more.
You get to control the height of
and
the
you
spring
get a
seat.
lot more road feedback.
Right.
You get your car, you kind of take it to the next level of a driver's vehicle.
And very important, you can corner balance the car now.
You can corner balance the car, which I shouldn't say you could corner balance. You should corner balance. So anytime you put a coilover on there, being that the vehicle's not like a BMW, the battery's in the right rear of the vehicle, the windshield washer fluid housing is in the front fender well. Then you have so basically all the passenger side gets the heavy stuff, except for the gas tank, which is on the driver's side. Or no, it's on the passenger side as well. So you got all these things that, it's just like setting up a race truck. Just because it's on the same axle doesn't mean I need to run the same spring rate or preload.
Right.
Right? A lot of guys, I'll set up a Jeep or something and they'll be like, wait, you told me 200 over 150 on the front driver, but you told me 150 over 150 on, because when the vehicle is suspending more weight, it needs more rate.
Right.
In this case, on the car side, it needs more preload.
Right.
So you can't just, which is typical of most guys installing coilovers. This is why Germany doesn't let you work on your own vehicles, is you can't just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and set your lock ring there.
No, you need scales and you need to figure out the weight bias, 50-50 front to rear, how you want to set that all up. And
corner weights. Corner weights is the absolute a must know when you're trying to corner balance a vehicle.
And that's a huge benefit to threaded body dampers is you can get the corner balances pretty darn good on these cars. And again, that by positioning the weight and the preload so that the weight on each corner is equal or as close to equal as you can get. Now, there are things called front to rear split and things like that where you actually want more weight on the rear wheels in certain cars and more weight on the front wheels in certain cars. But that's super important if you're really into tracking your car.
Well, and when you're buying coilovers, you figure anyhow you're trying to maximize performance. And when
traction and cornering. Yep.
When you're not corner balancing and properly aligning the vehicle, you're just throwing money in the trash if you're not doing that after the kit is installed.
Right.
You're not reaching the max potential of the component that you're putting in.
Exactly. But again, we give you that ability. That is, to me, that's one of the biggest benefits of a threaded body damper is the micro adjustments. So you're able to, it's not a snap ring, it's not welded in place, it's not a puck spacer under the spring or whatever. It's actually threads. And like Junior said, you know, a shop is going to look at the scales and go, okay, I need to raise this preload, I need to lower this preload. In the instruction manuals that we provide, it says here's a good starting point.
Correct.
Right?
Thanks for mentioning that, because I was going to mention that. Center of the eye to the bottom of your lock ring needs to be 465 millimeters.
That's a starting point.
That's a starting point, guys.
Right.
That's a starting point to make sure that your tires aren't going to grenade into your
Now
fingers.
take it to the alignment shop
take
and
it
get
to
a
alignment.
corner balance.
Yeah.
Well, I want to touch a little bit about, there's a lot of coilovers out there in the world. There's a lot of very cheap coilovers.
Oh, yeah.
And it like blows my mind when I look, especially like in the Asian car market. Man, you could buy a coilover for
$250 a set.
Exactly. And well, the thing is here's the coilover. It'll drop that thing all the way to the skid pan.
Right.
Where BILSTEIN, let's get back to the how low is too low. Our coilovers are a lot more expensive than that. They don't offer the amount of drop, and a lot of people are going, I'm buying a coilover because I want to drop the car.
BILSTEIN's not about tucking lugs, though. Yeah. They're about the performance
we said
of the
that
vehicle.
earlier. We're not going to make something that depletes the performance.
Exactly. But I think a lot of people that want to buy a coilover,
they want to make it as low as
they want to make it as low as possible.
Yeah.
And they could buy something for $1,000.
less than
less than $1,000.
Just make sure you wear real thick gloves when you're doing all your adjustments, because likely the external tube's going to give you some metal shards in your
Well,
finger.
and I don't think most people probably don't understand that just because you can lower your car all the way down to the ground doesn't mean that makes it perform any better. I mean, we have the motorsports heritage to prove that there's a point where you start losing performance.
If you're lowered all the way to the ground, there's no give, and it's not going to perform better, period.
Now, we also, though, are very aware that the consumer is the consumer, and the consumer wants what he wants. Correct. So we've now, because you just can't slam a vehicle on an inverted monotube damper. You can't, because you're in its bump stop that's obviously, again, internal of the damper. So we are introducing a new series, which is our Evo,
right, which
will allow you to go lower. I think max on some of the kits, and it's all obviously specific to the chassis. It's not just a broad drop, but I think you can get as low as 70 millimeter.
Right. Still tested and tuned, and obviously safety checked. And by the way, we want to throw in that if the stuff is being designed and engineered in Europe, one of our test tracks is the Nürburgring. So you don't show up to the Nürburgring with your car dragging the mufflers on the ground. They won't even let you on the track. Right. So everything that we test and tune is designed to enhance the performance of the car. If we build an Evo kit and we give you 70 millimeters of drop, we're also going to give you some guidelines on where it actually rides best. Does it ride best at 70 millimeters? And we know
at 70 millimeters that you're going to be able to adjust your tie rods for proper tow. We also know that you're going to be able to, and if it needs a camber arm, we're going to let you know. Or if it needs a different thrust arm, we're going to let you know. So it's also going to be within the values of what alignment and corner balancing, for the corner balancing and alignment needs.
So if you want to show up to Cars and Coffee with the trend, with your wheels sticking all the way up and rubbing the inner fender wells.
Right.
Tucking lugs.
Yeah.
We're probably not for you.
Right.
But if you want it to work good, if you want something that's tested on the Nürburgring, to enhance your vehicle so you can go around corners faster,
get better traction, better braking, better cornering,
then BILSTEIN's for you.
Yep. And we've said that again in all of our podcasts with all of the truck stuff is, there are crazy things that you can do with cars and trucks, but we're generally not we're not tying into that crowd to the point where it's crazy beyond the point where it's going to hurt you, right? We want to make products that enhance the vehicles.
I mean, well, how safe can some of this stuff be?
Yeah, exactly. Like the $250 coilover.
Like the guy that is running around in his 240SX on 19 by 12s, and the camber is like you're only using
driving on the inner edge of the rim.
You're only using 15 millimeters of your inner tire.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, we know that this guy's not going to a track, right? He's going to Cars and Coffee, and it's
a trend.
Yeah, it's a
100%
cosmetic,
but it's sticking like the Overland trend.
Yeah,
and most of the Overlanders have a stance. Lexus LS,
but it's a lot worse. I mean, you can't drive down the road with your tires like
they do it. It's
they do it, but I mean,
they do,
at least like with the Overlander. So what if you put some roto packs on the car?
Right.
If you had a max track and it's like
it's not hampering the performance, or it's not unsafe.
If you've got a pickup truck and you somehow have an empty bed but you've got crates on the roof,
right?
I don't know why you'd want to do that, but it's a trend. It's hurting your gas mileage, but I mean, driving around with the inner lips of your tire, the only thing touching, why would you do that?
I don't know. There's obviously
you got unlimited money for tires or something,
or rims if you try to turn or something.
Or you just flip them.
Yeah, you turn them around,
flip them so that the bald side's on the outside now.
So BILSTEIN is not following the trend. We're giving you something that's tested on the Nürburgring and is designed to perform.
Exactly.
So if that's what
performance
you want,
is our number one goal is to enhance the performance of your vehicle, and not to get it into a range where you're going to get excessive wear on steering components or your rack and pinion or any steering component that you have on there is not going to get excessive wear as long as you stay within our guidelines. Now there is guys out there that run the B16 kit on stance vehicles and they just buy different springs for it, so it dumps it.
Right. But we set it up with springs that would have enhanced the vehicle's performance. So
I think another thing to bring up, while we're on the topic of stance and $1,000 coilovers, it always bugs me when I see these coilovers that are anodized a certain color, blue, red, and they've got like the strut mount that's also threaded on a threaded body. That's aluminum on a car. Do you know how much force is going through those components?
not just force, but aluminum on aluminum. You can get what do they call that? Cold welding. You know, if you don't put anti-seize on the threads and all kinds of.
Well, the thing
stuff.
is, it looks cool, right? It does look cool,
right?
I mean, BILSTEIN struts, they're steel. Everything's welded together.
Well, we have some aluminum.
Yep. Some aluminum, but
not really on the struts. Right, no, we don't.
Right.
But there's a reason behind that, and it's safety.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of force going into a strut. It's the only thing holding up your car.
Right.
It's going to be made. We make it out of steel so it lasts.
Right.
You know, you're not going to fail it. You look at some of these coilovers for $1,000. First of all, there's no way they tuned it for the car.
Right.
And it like the aluminum looks nice, but like you really want to
How
own
long
your car?
is it going to look like that under your car?
There's a lot of coilovers out there too on the market. It's funny because I just recently adjusted a set that you don't preload the spring.
You spin around the mount.
You spin the mount out.
Yeah.
And it's like, don't people understand that when you're adjusting ride height, there's a benefit from spring preload?
Right, right.
Well, not only that, now you're adjusting this mount, and it's on a threaded.
Yeah, now
platform.
You're getting it further away from its.
Well, now
it's changing the dead length, isn't it?
Well, it's doing that, but it's like the thing that's your car's mounted onto is on something that moves.
Right, right.
Like,
the further you get it apart,
the more leverage there is.
The more leverage because it's not sunk down.
Exactly.
And
you're just like tightening up with a jam nut.
And there's not even a jam nut.
Designed to
the
do
ones
that.
I did, there wasn't even a jam nut on.
Whoa.
It just runs.
But I've also worked on trucks that don't have cotter pins in the ball joints and tie rods, so it's here nor there.
Yeah.
I'd expect that from a truck, but
a
car.
Yeah, car's more of a daily driver. Trucks, it seems like if we're modifying those, we do daily drive them, but modified to the point where they get crazy is that, that could go on a trailer and get towed home. So
to sum it up, if B12s are a great option, if you're trying to lower it, you want some better handling.
That's the fixed perch. Yep.
B14, if you don't track it, you don't need damping adjustments, but you want to corner balance it, get that thing dialed in.
Right.
B14 is a great option.
Right.
If you track it and you want a little heavier spring rates, a little heavier damping, some control for damping, B16s is the way to go.
Right.
If you're going to slam it, go to eBay.
I thought you were going to say go to Evo.
Go to eBay.
Go to eBay.
Yeah.
If you want to show up to Cars and Coffee with your trendy stance and your worn out tires,
zero performance,
go to eBay.
Yeah. So,
or if you want to wear a kidney belt and a helmet,
exactly. No tuning, but it looks good, right?
eBay.
One thing that Shane said something about it earlier, and we might save it for another episode. I just want to bring it up today and see if you guys want to talk about it a little bit. So Shane mentioned plug and play, right? So he meant that in one way, but truly, literally, we make plug and play dampers. Mm-hmm. So let's say Junior probably knows a BMW that comes with
EDC.
Yeah, EDC. Mm-hmm. We make a damper that comes out of the box with the right plugs into that EDC system, listens to the EDC computer, and changes your suspension settings with the factory computer, with the right buttons, or however it's set up from the factory.
Plug and play.
Plug and play.
PASM for the Porsche.
For the Porsche, yeah. So
CAT system for Jaguar.
For Jag. Everything. Another benefit of working with these companies, OE, is we design the software to go with the damper control system.
Are you supposed to be saying that?
Yes, I can say that because those systems are quite outdated. Yeah. But working with an OE, we can literally make a plug-and-play system and not have to use an adapter kit or something like that, or what's the
canceller?
A canceller.
Just like our Mercedes dampers for the aftermarket. Like we have a little piggyback reservoir on there that holds electronics that actually means something. It's not just an empty aesthetics box.
Well, the piggyback
Right?
reservoir
Like
on
the
that
competition.
unit is actually a set of bypass valves, right?
Yes.
That are controlled by the computer.
Correct.
Our competitor puts a resistor in there that turns the computer off.
Right.
So this is the kind of stuff that we...
Which, again, there's a market for.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
There's
like,
definitely
like.
a
Let's
market for
talk
that.
about that for a second. And this is my opinion. I'm sure we'll get comments.
And that's what we want. We want comments.
The big luxury cars are the ones with the air springs. The 7 Series BMWs, the big S-Class Mercedes, the big LS 460s. These are vehicles that are sprung by air.
Right.
For the comfort, the accessibility, you know. But typically, the real guys that could afford these cars are the ones that leased them. Right? So when you're in a lease, right, you something fails, they get replaced, right? When you turn it over after the lease, it's sold as a certified pre-owned car.
Right.
So now you got an extended warranty with a $50 deductible. So if an air spring goes bad, you take it back to the dealer and you replace it for
Right.
$50. Now you're the third owner. That probably shouldn't have bought the car.
High mileage
You
now.
were dreaming.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have bought the car.
Right.
Yeah, like, you really shouldn't have bought the car because now the air spring fails and likely they're going to go after the cheapest option they can get because an air spring module is not cheap.
It's very expensive.
Yep.
But what people don't understand is if you want the vehicle to function the way it was supposed to function, you can't override electronics.
Right. Keep all the safety features, the
cannot
ride height
override
control,
electronics.
all of that's there for a reason.
So all third owners of high-end cars,
Luxury cars
luxury cars
Yeah.
that have air springs
that have air springs,
and electronic dampers.
Yeah.
know that they're about $1,500 a corner
Right.
to replace them.
Right.
So you're in it for more than a transmission.
And more than the
Correct.
car's probably worth at that point. Yeah.
Yes.
So, we said there is a reason why we have competitors in that market. That is the reason because...
And Flex Seal.
yeah.
To try to,
Well,
you know,
it's
Exactly.
like any luxury car,
Right.
Not just the suspension, like anything on a
Yeah,
luxury
yeah.
car. It's like
You're the third owner.
chances are you're the one that's going to be maintaining it because the first two guys didn't.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. I mean, I have friends that have gotten into these type of deals, and let's say a sensor in the exhaust system fails, and you can no longer smog the car, and the sensor for the exhaust is $6,000. Are you going to cough up that kind of money for a car that's got 200,000 miles on it? So it's the same with suspension, except for suspension's more of a safety thing, not an emissions thing. But it's still it gets to a point where you're throwing good money.
But it
after
all
bad.
it all bleeds into light truck. The new technologies in light truck are the same. You got MagnaRide, GM.
Right.
You have GM Auto Ride. You
Which
have
all came from the car world.
right. You
Yeah.
have air sprung GX 460s, GX 470s. You have
Some Ram Rebels were air sprung. all
right.
around.
Yeah.
A lot of Rams were air sprung.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then you also have like Toyota's X-Reyes suspension,
Right.
which is a hydraulic type suspension. You got a guy with a 4Runner, and he goes to the dealer and they say, "Hey, your X-Reyes dampers are leaking. It's going to be $6,300."
To get him back operational.
Chances are he's going to shop around,
Right,
and,
right.
and realize that people are overriding these with no negative effects on the X-Reyes. There's also overrides for GM Auto Ride. Like these, there's guys out there that are into these overrides, but this is basically to bring awareness to what you're purchasing. Because quite honestly, a lot of people that are purchasing these vehicles don't even know what they're purchasing.
Right. The
They go
suspension's
on
a mystery. Yeah.
They go onto this lot and there's a beautiful 4Runner Limited that has X-Reyes. You think the salesman knows what X-Reyes is? Absolutely not.
Right.
So they're going off of aesthetics. Wow, this is beautiful. Look at the power steps.
Same with the
come out. Look at
Mercedes
this.
S series. Yeah.
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 So they don't have an understanding of what they're getting into. So those manufacturer build sheets that show the price of your $70,000 4Runner are there for a reason. Read them.
Yeah. Make sure you understand what kind of suspension nightmare you might be purchasing.
Or any kind of nightmare.
Yeah.
for that
Any
matter.
nightmare. But again, that plug and play is super important. For us here at BILSTEIN, we're super proud of the fact that we work with so many OEs.
There's so many of these the European cars that have electronic dampers now.
Yeah, well,
Tons of
So many.
like Junior was hinting at, it's sneaking into the truck world too, and we're trying to sneak in there with the OEs as well. So,
Yeah. And you know, which brings me to one of the biggest tech requests we get is I bought,
is this a hot tip?
this is a hot tip,
This is a hot tip.
hot tip. I bought shocks for the rear of my Tahoe and it drives like a beached whale.
The Nivomat.
Right. So, okay, so your vehicle was equipped with a specific suspension and you just replaced a load-bearing damper for something that's no longer load-bearing.
Right.
I think a lot of people don't know about a Nivomat. Let's explain
That's
that.
another
And
thing. That's another.
It's a good point because Nivomat happens on cars as well. Volvo
Yeah, it
uses.
And this is another option that people aren't aware that they're buying. You know what's the biggest model that's affected that people don't understand is Grand Cherokee and Durango.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They go to replace their shocks and we get a call, you made your shock wrong. No, you didn't know what you bought.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Back to the build sheet.
Back to the build sheet.
Yep.
So if your vehicle is equipped with Nivomat, this is a completely mechanical setup. So
Ride height adjustable.
this is a lot easier to override than an auto ride or anything because there's no lights that are on
Spring
the dash
rate.
or triggering.
Yeah, yeah.
It's all when the damper and the spring kind of shares load-bearing properties, right?
Right.
So it gets down to a certain part of its travel on the compression side and the damper kicks in.
ratchets up. Yep.
And it's mostly for vehicles that have tow package.
Right.
Now, when you're taking off a damper off a Tahoe that weighs 60 pounds and you need 3 guys under there to help you take it off, there's a reason for it.
Well, it's prevalent on any rear coil spring car.
Yeah.
So they put the, especially on the SUVs, they put the coil
It
spring.
happens
for
a
comfort.
lot actually in the car world.
Yeah.
A lot of them use a Nivomat type system.
Station wagons and
Yep.
things like
so
that.
you do have to be
Well,
careful.
station wagons, I think, were more like on the German side. The U.S. didn't get many wagons, but like on the E61,
Any mechanical load leveling system.
right? So like the E61 BMW 5 Series wagon from model year 2006 to 11 when they stopped it. Those were air sprung in the rear. Those had an airbag in the rear. So they assumed you bought a wagon, you either have a big family or you have big cargo. So, and these are automatic load leveling. It's nothing the consumer's giving input to. It measures the damper off yaw sensors.
Yep.
So when the vehicle goes down and that magnetic yaw sensor
Passes
a certain part, it triggers the ECU. It tells the airbags, pump me back up.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of applications that are like that. Nissan Armada started it in 2004. The LE models, every one of them had airbags. And they're an absolute nightmare. They're absolute nightmare.
But back to the Nivomat. So hot tip, we were going to give the people a hot tip on that. Usually an indicator of a Nivomat system on your suspension is that the damper is quite a bit larger in diameter than the one, let's say you're taking Nivomat off. We always used to say, did you take off a damper that was 6 inches in diameter and you put one back on that's 2 inches in diameter? The Nivomat damper, since it contains that spring around the outside of it, inside of it is actually larger. You're looking at a larger housing than you would be looking at the damper that you put back on.
And like I said, it weighs a ton. So there's something that's either telling the mechanic that you're having it done at or yourself that there's something here.
So BILSTEIN makes a kit for that.
Yep.
What is it that we do to get around taking the Nivomat damper off?
We just do 100% load bearing spring with a 4600.
So
it's a whole kit.
The kit includes a new rear spring and a new damper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's on the Tahoe. That's the only kit we made.
Suburban. Suburban Tahoe.
Yeah, I don't think for the cars.
Different spring rates, though. The Suburban uses a heavier spring rate. But
kits on that.
But I'm going to go back and challenge on that because the Durango and the Grand Cherokee, the problem is the piston rod in the Nivomat shock is smaller.
Yep. And the mounts are different.
Right. So they can't fit our piston rod into the mount.
Yep.
So you get the guy that says, hey, you made your shock wrong. It's not working on my, no, you have a Nivomat.
Right.
So it's not a matter of just changing the mount and getting the damper to fit because you can do that.
Yeah.
You need a 100% load bearing spring to do it.
Yep. Well, kind of a busy day here. Anything else we want to cover before we wrap it up today,
I'm
guys?
sure there's something Shane wants to cover. I mean,
Well, Shane's got that look on his face like there's something he wants to cover.
No, I think we've talked it all
out.
so we don't, just to set the record straight, we do not have a conversion kit for Grand Cherokee or Durango for Nivomat.
In case you were thinking,
we do have the Tahoe.
The Tahoe,
and the Suburban.
Right.
Up to model year...
06?
No.
I think so.
Yeah, it's 07 and a half. 07 and a half.
It's like Larry's.
Yeah, 07 and a half. We have the conversion kit from 99 to 07 and a half for the rear of Nivomat Suburbans and Tahoes.
I'm glad you set the record straight on that.
Right.
Yeah.
But the idea behind that conversation was to let folks know that in the car world, this stuff exists as well. Make sure that you replace the parts on your car with something that was designed for the build kit.
Yeah, I think more importantly, educate yourself on what you're buying.
Exactly.
And, or if you've already bought it, educate yourself on what you have.
Yep.
So this way, the challenges are less. And you know what I've done my whole entire life is when I buy something and it's like some one-off, or it's like, oh, I got a Trackhawk, or I got this, or I got that. I've never had a Trackhawk. I'm not that financially stable. But if it's an odd part, I just rip the tag off of whatever I bought so I know what to buy next time, and I just toss it in my glove box.
Yeah, exactly. Keep that, like if it was a Nivomat tag or something
Right.
like that, keep that somewhere handy.
Yeah, just or now I guess you don't even have to rip the tag off and keep it. You
take a
take
picture
a
of it.
screenshot
Yeah,
of it,
yeah,
a picture
yeah.
of it, like
Yeah.
because not everything's the same. Like there's
Well, it goes back to what we talk about package fitments on cars. They build cars all kinds of different weird ways with different packages, and if you're not aware of what,
and
you're
that's so
dealing with-
prevalent now on the new Tacoma 2024. My gosh,
Oh yeah, that thing's gonna be crazy.
Leaf sprung under, coil sprung, spring over axle. It's like,
Are some of them wider? Do they have
Yeah.
wider suspension?
Yeah, like
narrower suspension?
was Toyota bored?
We have
Like
to
this
save
is like
that.
this
Save
is
it.
like
Save it.
This is like something I never thought Toyota would do. Like they were always the one where first gen taco, second gen taco, third gen taco. It's like one size fits all,
Until
pretty
now.
much, right? So you can actually catalog one part for a gazillion years for a gazillion applications, because they're also very slow at coming out with new body styles, new technology. But this time, man, they hit a home run, huh?
Yeah.
Well, they got a lot of competition.
Yeah. And
Sprung under axle from the factory on a pre-runner.
yeah, we're gonna
How do
dedicate
you
a whole
feel
show
about
to
that?
that.
I'd rather have the one with a coil spring. Why am I
Right.
wasting my time
Right.
with a leaf spring when I can have a coil
And why
spring?
build how many different chassis to accommodate a pre-runner?
I have no idea.
You're gonna have to save that for another episode, guys.
Are we going to get into the new Tacoma next time?
We
we may just dedicate.
well,
an episode
hey,
to-
I found out good news.
What?
They're bringing the Land Cruiser back to the U.S.
Woo!
Yeah, yeah.
And
Now there'll be more than just yours
basically,
here.
it's smaller, more affordable. So what it is a GX 550 and Toyota clothing.
There you go.
That's going to be the 300 series Land Cruiser. Basically a Prado. They're bringing to America.
And I take it
the
you're
all-world
saving
vehicle.
your money.
Yeah.
I don't have that
Because
much money
you
to
gotta
save,
have
pal.
it.
I got a 100 series. Costs $100. I don't got that kind of cash. But I would probably choose coil springs if they had an option of leaf or coil. I'm choosing coils. I don't understand where Toyota's mindset was.
Now I have to create new projects for leaf spring vehicles.
Yep.
Right.
Well,
Like I got nothing better to
Like
do.
you
We
can't
gotta do it
pre-run.
right.
You can't pre-run with coil springs. I mean, hasn't TRX proven that it's possible? Now with the new Raptor coil sprung rear,
Ram 1500.
they started it
09.
09.
Yep.
Why couldn't we?
And guess what, Toyota? Ram 2500s have a huge tow rating with rear coil springs.
I don't get it.
I don't get it.
And why would it be spring under?
Because it look.
No,
Look,
it doesn't.
spring under is not a bad look when you're putting 33s or 35s. If you guys want to put 35s on your Tacomas, we recommend not to. But if you got, it doesn't look bad when it's modded. But when it's stock and the springs are under the axle, it looks like a mistake.
You know what springs were under the axle?
Jeep springs.
No.
S10s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Chevy
Yeah.
S10s. 5-lug Toyotas. Nissan hard bodies.
We're getting back to the 80s.
Yeah.
Right.
Getting
These
back
are
to the 80s.
these
Everything
were like,
old is new again.
but
right?
these were like the whole sprung under thing came around what, maybe in 08, 09? Everyone wanted to take them off the top of the axle and put them under the axle because it gave them so much more travel.
Yeah, recently.
Yeah.
And of course, you need to change all your mounts.
Yep.
Right.
Move them farther away.
Right.
And then you had to have like basically a 10-inch lift spring.
Exactly.
And then you put the axle on top, and you had all this spring rate.
Yeah,
that would build up.
you're basically, your leaf pack looks like the Spanish Steps.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? It's almost touching the ground.
And then when it goes all the way up into full compression, it sends the back end of your truck
Yeah.
like end over end
Yeah.
if you hit something.
it's
That
you
low.
need you need tons of
firm.
rebound.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not sure about that one, but yeah, you're right. That could be a topic for.
I think it will. I think we're gonna close up today, and we're gonna spend
I don't
some
want to
time.
close up. Let's talk about the RAV4.
The RAV4.
That's another thing that's their suspensions are the same, but they're so crazy different. You got the Prime that has crazy spring rates. Then you have
Is
the
this
base
something
LE.
that just came out?
No.
Oh, okay.
But you know, it's like just stick with one thing, man. Like what happened to simplicity in the automotive industry?
There's nothing simple about it. That's what keeps us in business.
Hey, maybe that's why they can't build cars anymore. It's too complicated.
Exactly. And that's a great way to take us out, folks. Thanks for listening to us today. We hope you tune in, listen to us next time. Leave all your horrible comments for us down in the comment section, and we hope you check back with us for the next episode.